Why does my product look wrong in half the shots? How to make an AI commercial that actually ships comes down to locking the product as a character before generating, not fixing it afterwards under deadline. The complaint arrives weekly, always in different words. How to make a commercial with AI. AI product commercial. The job was a 250 milliliter energy drink can, 8 steps from first reference to delivered spot, in the order the clock allowed. The spot's shot list is where speed turns into risk. A 30-second commercial is a run of shots that all have to agree about one object, and every generation starts from zero and holds nothing you did not hand it. So each shot is an independent guess, defensible alone, and the moment you run them faster than you can inspect them, the guesses ship. Nothing is forgetting the can either, because nothing ever learned it, which means the failure is not carelessness on the machine's part, it is arithmetic on yours. That is the volume trap in one line. Because output scales cleanly, and inspection does not, and no amount of hiring changes the shape of that curve. Removing the guess upstream is the only move that scales with the output rather than against it. And a commercial is the least forgiving place to learn that. Because the product is the one thing the audience already knows by heart. So a wrong cap gets noticed long before a weak edit does. The can's product sheet is the first thing locked. It gets locked once for the whole campaign, and that single decision is where how to make an AI commercial stops being a gamble. Matte navy running into black, a gold shooting star comet across the face, a brushed aluminium rim, and one design name, Midnight Cosmos, that everything downstream refers back to. Generate the views. Judge them on whether they read at the size the ad gets watched. Pick one, close the question. InVideo Agent holds that sheet in the project's context, so it reaches every later generation without anyone remembering to attach it. Which matters most on the day nobody has time to remember anything. An unclosed product decision is a drift risk with a start date. Judge the views on whether the light direction and the surface read clearly, lock the winner, and stop generating cans. Because every extra option is a decision postponed rather than a decision improved. The casting brief is the second lock. Reading it out shows why briefing once beats briefing often. Close to verbatim, it asks for a passenger, mid-shot, seated by a window, holding the can naturally rather than presenting it, with an expression that carries the moment the cabin becomes something else. Notice the economy. Not one word describes the can, because InVideo Agent already carries it, so the whole brief is spent on what is still open. Brief that way at volume, and the briefs get shorter every campaign rather than longer. The attachment panel afterwards shows what came back against it, which is the only honest way to grade a brief, on output, rather than on how well it reads. Alex's character sheet is the third lock. The shape is want, choice, action. The want is a passenger whose face carries the turn from cabin into open space, which is the only emotional beat the spot has to land. The choice is the take that survives being small on a phone, because that is where the impressions actually land. The action is locking it and refusing to reopen it later, which is the discipline that separates a campaign from a folder of options. A lead still under consideration at shot 40 is a lead who will look different at shot 40, and reopening always happens on the tightest day. 2 locks now exist, 1 object and 1 person, and every shot after this is those 2 playing a scene rather than being described again. That is the moment a folder of generations becomes a campaign with a cast. And on a fast schedule, it is the moment the schedule stops fighting you. The scenes and shots upload is where the spot gets planned. The storyboard reads verbatim as sent. Open inside the cabin. Hold on the passenger. The window becomes the field of stars. The can carries through the turn. Close on the product. Generation goes out from there, routed by InVideo Agent to whichever model fits each shot. Seedance 2.5 among them, at batch speed. Choosing between models is not work worth doing by hand, because model research renews every few weeks and cannot be amortized, while a locked sheet carries the whole campaign. Worth naming the difference from where most operators come in. Higgsfield keeps a recurring person consistent through sole ID attached at generation. In this workflow, the lock sits in the project instead, so nothing gets reattached per shot and nothing gets skipped when the day gets short. Attaching by hand works fine at 10 shots and quietly fails at 100, which is the whole reason this distinction matters more at volume than anywhere else. The project settings panel fixes the format once. At volume, an unreasoned setting multiplies. Resolution 1920 by 1080, because television is one of the destinations and a feed is only the loudest. Length written to 30 seconds against the placement, and delivery came in at 31.9 seconds carrying its own audio. The two-half structure entered as a shot plan. Cabin first, space second. So the turn is scheduled rather than hoped for. And the permission setting, which on a campaign this size is a real decision. InVideo agent set to ask before generating videos, because paid work is the one place approving beats reviewing. Most of how to make an AI commercial is settled in this panel before a frame exists, by people who never mention the panel at all. The product sheet pinned in context is why this ships at all. InVideo agent enforces a locked product sheet on every shot a campaign generates, which is what makes a spot shippable without a frame-by-frame review. Consistency stops being a performance somebody gives and becomes a property the project has. Properties ship. Vigilance does not. And vigilance is the thing that runs out first on a fast week. Making an AI commercial is settled the hour the product gets locked, not the hour the footage gets reviewed. And at volume, that ordering is the entire business. The drift evidence grid is what the alternative looks like. A label sitting crooked in one generation. A cap in the wrong color in the next. A color shift across two shots that should have matched. A logo sliding off center. Every one of those passes a fast review, which is precisely the problem, because the errors that damage a campaign are the ones a rushed eye reads as fine. Then the corrected result sits beside them, generated against the locked sheet rather than a description, and the difference stops being subtle the moment the two sit together. That grid is the argument for locking upstream, made without a single word of theory. Keep one on file for every campaign, because it is the fastest way to explain to anyone why the setup hours are not optional, and it argues better than any deck. The finished spot is the proof, and the last stage is pipeline-shaped. Selects moved into Premiere Pro in batches, the assembly held together, and no salvage work entered the schedule, because InVideo agent had already resolved the corrections upstream. The can reads the same across the cabin half and the space half. The label sits straight in every shipped shot, and Alex is the same passenger start to end, with no shot pulled back for a fix after delivery. The limit to plan around is that a lock holds only what it names, so anything undecided is still being invented per shot, which makes the setup hours the highest return hours on the whole campaign. That is how to make an AI commercial at pace. And if you would rather lock once than inspect everything, InVideo agent is where the lock lives. It is invideo.io. The spot. Made with InVideo agent.